In line with the history of World War II, I was just looking through here, it would seem like tonight's news items might be called The Night of the Long Headings. WW2 doesn't get the kind of response it used to when you... I guess most of the people that found it at all humorous are now dead. Or in such advanced years that they find it hard to laugh aloud. Does this mean we're ready to go? All right. And now the news. There was once a man who had a servant who was in debt to another master. And while the man could do nothing about the other master, the servant he still had under some control. This is the story of man's two main functions, and a hint regarding how they might be manipulated. This side of enlightenment, awakening, and liberation is one thing only: constantly controlled attention. That is, the relentless determination to achieve same. What will get you through the second will get you through the minute, and what will get you through the moment will take you to the end. There was once a man who had an inflatable toy, and the more he inflated it, the more fun it was. Not that. It's what happens when a mystic ends up working a cheap joint like this. Told my agent not to book me in Jersey. It is the job of the ordinary, passively and properly, toiling in life's civil vineyard, to dwell on matters of behavior. It is your responsibility, if you are born into it, to distance yourself via an expansion of consciousness from having to be concerned with matters of behavior. Unthinking animals belong in yokes and harnesses, not conscious men. And the relevant law is that only you can free you. Today's inspirational thought: the body is the source of all complaints, but it can say nothing. So who shall speak for this noble beast? You shall, dummy, if you don't watch it. In addition to striving to learn the secret, a man should be paying constant heed to the overlooked information already available within himself. Much of the world's greatest unknown discoveries are in man, and you may delete the word much if you care to. A man had an unusual idea and wondered if it would fly, and life said, "Son, anything will fly." Thought without controlled attention should not be called thought in intelligent company. Tonight's relevant law for those who are relevant to themselves: if you talk about other people, you will complain about them. Count on it. One man said, "I can't read my own writing." Another said, "I can't understand my own thinking." And a third declared, "Not only are my emotions beyond my comprehension, I can't even see the purpose in me having them, other than to suffer." The last observation may have some validity, or it may not. Guess you could check it out for yourself if you're so inclined. Today's traveler's tip: you can't stop a speeding train, but you can slow it down if you've made plans in advance. Today's harsh person's tip: if you cannot hold one thing in mind, you should not say that you have a mind. Nothing is stronger than a man's determination, except death and emotions. And one of them can be greatly influenced via determination. Every active warrior will have a constantly changing list of subjects that he will not talk about to himself. That is, even to himself. Today's lifesaver for those with no interest in saving theirs. The most direct way by which to continue to take no responsibility for your own development is to await help. Creativity and the art of moving. The question of originality doesn't mean anything if you don't plan to ever leave home. One man's most contemporaneous conclusion is that almost anything would be possible if I could but hold my mind to it. He invites you to also ponder this, along with an expanded consideration of what hold in mind might ultimately represent. Not long after the above transpired, a viewer wrote in to say that it is certainly not true that anything would be possible just because a man might hold his mind to it. And no sooner had he said that than Life commented, "Son, the mind and there being anything possible are downright synonymous." The relevant law here expressed as, only unthinking operations are locked in. One man's undertaken an investigation as to whether the tempo at which he lives is being directed by his body or some less physical operation. He says feel free to join him. Today's sage advice from the old sage himself. Quoting, "You can talk about being more conscious until the cows come home, but if you can't keep your attention focused on home, you can kiss your ideas of being more conscious goodbye, bye-bye." And an ordinary hearer of this asks if we can't shoot the old sage and put him out of his discomfort. The hearer's discomfort, that is. A real warrior doesn't die from defeat, nor does he perish from aging, illness, or other circumstances. A real warrior dies from one thing only, prolonged forgetfulness. The matter of help, once and for all, and then some, explained. Even if help in your development was possible, there is an additional catch. Help is not possible yesterday, and help is not possible tomorrow. If help were possible, it could only be possible right this very moment. And here's the glitch. No one exists in your life right this very moment but you. So, you see the problem. The question of creativity, another look-see. What can man create? His body? No. His thoughts? No. His emotions? No. So what is left? What remains is the possibility of redirecting the energies available in what already is. One man had 2 wild dogs that he couldn't control, so he sicked them on one another. Even under the general umbrella aim of wanting to achieve enlightenment, be awakened, or gain liberation, one should at all times have a more immediate personal goal. Simplicity, yet again, easily exemplified. The reason that trying to be conscious in the moment seems like such a big deal is because it requires your constant attention. After hearing something said here on the program, one man so mused, if a valid beginning to the attempt to love your fellow man is to not think about your fellow man, then is something similarly true regarding having a better feeling about yourself. Interesting notion, huh? But how about this? Consider, do you think about you, or do your thoughts do? And of course, if you know no difference, then it's irrelevant. A man finding fault with life will lack sufficient time to be properly disgusted with himself. Say, you suppose that's why people do it? Today's stopgap measure for those anxious to stop certain stuff. Stop all inner conversations that have anything to do with you personally. And today's tip a la mode. Once you've come to the full realization regarding emotions, you spell sin but one way. CRITICISM, or any other variation of irritation and aggression. The relevant law here would be silence, a warrior's only acceptable reproach. Notwithstanding the fact that man is literally an incompleted work, if you think that you are completed, then you are. And if you think that, then no change or growth is possible. Even if a man's resolve was meaningless, life is meaningless without it. Note, this is true for both the ordinary and the few. It's just more true for one of them. To keep it simple and your terminology straight, you should not think of consciousness without controlled attention as being consciousness. Today's help tip for those way beyond mere questions of health. Without physical sensations, the body could not survive. And without physical sensations, emotions would never be. You take it from there. Today's cleaning tip. If you don't think about other people, you won't get your hands dirty. The primary cause of mental blindness is fault finding. Or behind door number 2, it goes, you can judge a man's level of consciousness by how much he complains. Or, as big door number 3 would say, the comprehension of life leads to much shutting up. There is no salvation without growth, and no growth with the awaiting of salvation. One man's question of the hour. You can sure have fun with the body, and sure have fun with the mind, if you know how. But how come nobody seems to know how to have real fun with their emotions? Or am I missing something here? A boy inquired of his dad, "What is the difference in making fun of someone and criticizing them?" And the elder replied, "What is the difference between dung and shit?" And the lad replied, "People think that one of them sounds better than the other." There was once a man who concluded that civilization, that is, the gradual collective of evolution of man, is no more than sounds. "Sounds too simple to me," said the boy. To believe that you've been poisoned, even by your own hand, is to forever live a toxic life. Mankind, the collective, grows and flourishes at one speed, a speed at which an individual might wither and die. It's truly fascinating how much you'll miss and effort you'll save if you but look away. The body's made to be here right now. The rest of man, however, seems another story. By the way, what's your story? Tonight's pain medication. If you had attention under full control, you could only be hurt physically. From one view, the best thing to do with ordinary emotions is not talk about them. Tonight's countdown. If you are aware of only one state of consciousness, then there is only one. In his pursuit of just where to look, one man eventually asked himself, is the secret right out there in the open, alone, or is it in the overlaps? Searching is most productive when it never ends. The last three words being a parallel description of life, and it being the very place wherein the secret resides. Does anyone see a pattern here? An endless, reoccurring pattern. From an intense view, there are but two times: now and wasted opportunity. Today's cheer-up reminder: you're at least still in the ball game if you continue to find the attempt to be conscious in this very moment fascinatingly frustrating. Today's supersonic conversational tip: just because life doesn't say anything back is no reason for you not to speak to it. One man's song: I take drugs to speed up, I take drugs to slow down. I have drugs for all occasions, I have emotions. The few oftentimes feel as though the wrong things are illegal. Without total honesty with himself, a man cannot awaken. And to be honest, and to be so honest, is not something you either do or do not do, but is something you must learn to do. A real warrior is never overcome by life, only by himself and his uncontrolled emotional reactions to life. Today's final tip of tips for the perceptive few: get real, in that special real sense. The earth being alive, mountains tremble and storms rage, but somewhere in the midst a quiet lake exists. Man, in consciousness and potential, is thy name poetry. And finally, one man says that the wisest words he ever heard his father say was when he'd say, I hardly know what else to say. There is a very distinct propriety of the ideas that have been used throughout history of saying, the major three I'll refer to again, of saying that man lives in a state of sleep, but he could be awake, or that man lives in the dark, but he could live in the light, or that man lives in captivity, but he could live or he could be liberated. Besides all the other mishmash that's been made of it, such things, they all offer perhaps a use and a view that you have overlooked, that is of a practical nature and touches upon man's relationship as an incomplete work to life itself. And that is, within such descriptions are being made blatant statements of observable facts, to wit, that under all kinds of conditions, under ordinary conditions, there are varying degrees of the state of what men call consciousness. Perhaps the easiest to exemplify what I am pointing towards is to take the one that man is asleep, but he could be awake. The other two work just as well, but that is neat on the basis that we all, let's start with ordinary people, because I want you to see that the statement is being made, life allows it out, and ordinary people have some knowledge of this fact. That everyone understands those terms, so that you don't have to, if we start using it symbolically, to say that it has some allegorical meaning, but it also has a literal basis. Because ordinary people understand what, if you just talk about sleep with ordinary people, they understand, well, yeah, at night when I get tired, I go to bed and I go to sleep. So they understand that I live part of my life in a state called sleep, but then 2/3 of the day I'm awake. So just to take that idea, or to take that interpretation, that understanding of the two terms, everyone knows this, that when you are asleep in the ordinary sense, in bed at night, you cannot, while you're asleep, the mind's still going on and you're dreaming, you cannot distinguish that which is real from that which is unreal, which is why men came up with the idea to call them dreams and nightmares as opposed to their ordinary thought processes. Because, and that's not to make light of it, I'm not being sarcastic yet. I mean, insightfully critical. All right, sarcastic. Anyway, everyone knows you cannot distinguish the real from the unreal. You can be having a nightmare, and the mind at least has this function with most people. If you have a nightmare that is to an extreme, you will wake yourself up, in a sense, because you realize that you can no longer deal with the nightmare, and you know it's not real, except it's getting so frightening that you have to awaken yourself because you don't know what will happen. That you actually have, you lack the ability of yourself in the dream world, that whatever scene is going on, you lack the ability to actually distinguish between the real and unreal. And that's part of what the fun is, and the artists have tried to use it as fodder, because you know that you can be one place and there's been some little scene going on that you were doing one thing, and you walk down the street and suddenly you're on the other side of the world. And you try and say something to somebody, and suddenly you're back where you started with. There's no sense of time, there is no limitations of space. You can imagine, the mind can imagine things that seem as real enough. Nightmares that somebody's killing you, or somebody threw you off of a cliff and you're about to hit the bottom. And something tells you, this is not true, but goddamn, this is too frightening. And so you wake up. Compared to that, everyone understands, we're just using ordinary terminology now, and a view, that compared to that, when you're awake and out of bed, you can distinguish that which is real from unreal at the ordinary sense. So men know that there are different stages, different degrees of what they call consciousness. I could take the one that men live in the dark, or the one in captivity, because everyone, humanity, everyone speaks of and dreams of some kind of freedom. They speak of various freedoms, ranging all the way from political to social. And so men have a sensation that they're living in some kind of captivity. And if they consider it was economic captivity, then a person would imagine, they will swear that it would be true, that if you gave them X amount of money, if you gave them $1 million, that they would, at least in that sense, they would then be liberated economically. And we won't go into what would happen years later if you gave them $1 million. They accept it as the truth, that they would be set free, they would be liberated. People living under adverse political circumstances, then they speak of course, political freedom. And sure enough, if they describe it, or if they can leave the country, or if they've been under different circumstances before, they have something to compare it to. They know that there are different degrees of freedom. All of this is absolutely applicable to a man's consciousness. That I could make up new ones, but being asleep, being in the dark, being in captivity, and then the opposite, or the opposite counterparts to those three conditions being supposed descriptions of a superior state of consciousness, they cover the whole field of possibilities quite adequately. The question as to why it would be said, and why it strikes men as being of some validity, that he is living in a state of sleep, a state of captivity, or a state in which he is in the dark, all has to do with the fact that there is something being hidden and is based upon a kind of self-deception. As long as you're asleep, back to the ordinary description of it, if you are in bed asleep and dreaming, that any ordinary person would agree is an extreme form, an observable form, one that everyone can agree on and discuss, that you are engaged by and large in forms of self-deception. And man attributes it, whatever physiology or sociology now has come up with, to the less intense, the change in the cycle pattern of the brain waves, and that the brain is now not functioning at its optimum level, and it has trouble distinguishing truth from fiction, and that you are not conscious. You're not awake in the ordinary sense. And so there you are, and your consciousness cannot oversee what the brain does, and so it can imagine and deceive itself, which is the only way that you can have such dreams and nightmares. Because a professor of logic, a man who is not given to any flights of fancy, all he's got to do is eat some anchovies and lay down, and he'll have nightmares and fantastic dreams, and it'll look like some of the artwork from the psychedelic 60s. So it is simply a form of self-deception. It's not normally referred to as that, but ordinary people would agree to that dreams of all sorts are, to varying degrees, forms of self-deception, because if you're dreaming, it is normally of a nature of things that would not occur, that people do not seem to bother, their brain does not seem to bother to dream cinema verite, that you don't dream black and white, gritty, grainy. You don't dream your everyday life. You don't live your damn everyday gritty, black and white, or beige life, your same old boring or harsh or whatever it was life. Then eat a nice meal, have a few drinks, take off your clothes and go to bed and dream the same day. That is, dream what happened that day. I don't know why. People's brains do not seem to be given at all to that endeavor. They dream things that are fantastic. They dream things that may be based on something that happened during the day. They may dream something to do with the circumstances of their life, but they do not dream it as cinema verite. That it's not. They do not dream it as just a replay, literally, factually, of what occurred. They do not dream documentaries of their life. If they dream it, they dream fantasies of their life. Cartoon versions. So in that sense, do you understand, it's not a metaphysical judgment of any sort yet. It is a form of self-deception. The brain is playing out in your consciousness, as far as you can remember it, but everyone knows what I'm talking about, is your brain seems to be set free in some way, that you are not, still using ordinary terms now, that you are not ordinarily conscious enough to oversee it. Being a sane, ordinary, everyday person, you know fact from fiction, you know fanciful thoughts and dreams from hard facts, that when you're awake, in the ordinary sense during the day, you do not dream that elephants can fly. You do not dream that there's spirits. You do not dream that furniture can move. You do not dream that you, through some trick, can walk into the next room and the next room will be Bali, that you suddenly went from Birmingham to Bali. If you told a man that, he'd go, certainly not. But he lays down and goes to sleep, and his mind will do those very things, as though that there has been some sort of governor, some sort of overseer removed from it, and now it can deceive itself in a way that ordinary people will agree is self-deception. Even though, as I said, people do not call it that. But if I say, well, you realize all dreams, any dream you have, if it is not simply a documentary of something real, which dreams are not, as we just covered, I could say the fancifulness of dreams, you could say, is a form of self-deception, because your brain is now playing out ideas and pictures and scenes for you that you know in your waking state are impossible, do not happen, cannot happen, will never happen. They're simply what they're called, dreams. Well, yeah. Now, so in a sense, it's a form of self-deception. Your brain is deceiving you. The person will go, okay. So they know that much. The question, if anybody made anything of it, is it should be two questions. What is the purpose? Is there any chance I can see a purpose to this kind of self-deception? And can I perceive what specific effect it is having on me if I have a name? Try it backwards, the last one first. There is a sense, a true sense in which, even though this word is kicked around also, we've already admitted, of honesty, there is a kind of honesty, a lack of self-deception that is required, or there is no change possible. There's certainly there's no transcendental change. There's no change of consciousness possible. But, as Dr. Hung said, dig it, there's no change possible at the ordinary level without a certain kind of honesty. Again, I'm just pointing out, not to prove anything at the ordinary level, but people ordinarily understand. A common, perhaps the most salient example in our time is alcoholism. That by all reports, psychologists, AA, everyone says that an alcoholic cannot attempt to recover. He cannot make one move toward recovery, toward treating himself, toward recovering, until what? Until he admits that he is an alcoholic. That's the first thing, as far as I know, that AA requires, and if you think about it, it's got to be true. At the ordinary level. It's the same thing that's required for conversions to religions. One way or the other, they all require that you say, I am not a Muslim now, or I am not a Christian, but by holding up my hand, by lighting this candle, by doing some ritual, by just saying that I am a heathen, but from henceforth I will be a slave to God, I will be a Muslim. But you must first admit that you're not to be converted. To be saved, you must say, I'm lost. So everyone knows that there is some kind of honesty required for a person to change at the ordinary level, to quit drinking. If someone is an alcoholic, you have got to first admit, all right, you've got to be honest, say, all right, I'm an alcoholic. Then, and only then, is it possible to change, to attempt to change even. If you magnify that a whole bunch of times, then the attempt to change yourself in a meaningful way, not to simply change behavior and not to just simply change some bad habit, some vice you have, to actually begin to bring your consciousness under your own control, to do something approaching, something that might be conducive, someone that might lay out a background, fertilize the soil for you achieving some kind of awakening or enlightenment or liberation. There is likewise, but magnified a bunch of times, a kind of honesty. But here it gets tricky, because if you have any understanding of this by now, there is nothing to repent of, there is nothing to confess to, and there is nothing to which to swear your allegiance. I'm comparing that to religion and such things as AA. I guess I better make specific examples, even though I'm just making this up. If there was an organization somewhere, a physical organization right now, that their whole raison d'etre was to increase a person's consciousness, to help them increase their consciousness, to stabilize it, and for them to be conscious in the moment, that was their purpose, and it was an organization not dissimilar to Alcoholics Anonymous, not dissimilar to the church, that you could go there. If there was such an organization, then they would have no requirement equal to, in any literal sense, some admission, some sign, some change, or some behavioral, like lighting a candle or making some sort of thing that was accepted. It was first that it has to be described to you, because you can't come in and do your own. They have to say, Alcoholics Anonymous say, all right, we will help you. We have the tools, we have the experience, we know how to help a man stop drinking. And he says, well, that's what I want. And they go, all right, first, here's what you must do. They don't ask you what you want to do. They tell you that the first thing you must do is admit that you're an alcoholic. Or if you go to church and you tell them that you're interested, that you want to feel better, you'd like to get in touch with the life itself, you would like to have some knowledge of what the purpose of existence is, and they go, well, we have the experience, that's our expertise. And you go, well, I want to join up. And they say, all right, the first thing you must do is confess, since you're not of the church, you're not, as the Christians will say, you're not part of the body of Christ. You're outside, or the Muslims will say you're an infidel. Most other people throughout the world would say you're an infidel or a pagan. You're not part of their belief system. You're not part of their body of God. So they would say the first thing you must do is confess that up until now you have been ignorant. You have been cut off from God. You have been a sinner. And you go, okay, and so you admit it. That's the first thing you must do. Now, back to my fictitious, if there was a school of enlightenment, and everybody knew where it was, you could go and you went there, and you said, here's what I want, and you described it, and they went, well, that's our experience, that's all we're here for, that's all we're interested in. And you go, okay, how do I start? There is no such thing comparable to religion or Alcoholics Anonymous. Think about it a second. And in case you hadn't got the point, there is a reason, not that the church or AA understands it, but the admitting a sign of some superior, some, at least for you, new honesty is required to even attempt, to even get involved with the illusion, the belief that you might attempt change, as mundane as it would be to quit drinking, or as mundane as it is to go from being whatever a heathen is to being a Catholic, whatever that amounts to. And I'm saying mundane, not to attack it, but just to try and draw a comparison, that that's things that ordinary people attempt every day. It's going on every minute of the day. Somebody's joining AA, or somebody's attempting or showing interest in converting to a religion. So at that level, what I'm saying is their demand, not that they understand it, but their demand that a person display a kind of honesty by saying, yes, I am an alcoholic, now let's get on with it. Or yes, I am a sinner, I have missed the mark, I am not part of the body of Christ or of Allah, and I want to be. And I am not now, I am sinful, I am ignorant, but I admit it. That serves a purpose. That serves a quite valid, real purpose with ordinary thinking. That is, ordinary people. The reason I'm stressing that is now let's go back to my fictitious school of liberation, school of enlightenment. And you go up there and they say, yes, what you described is exactly what we're involved with. That's all we do. We've had years of experience. And you go, okay, I'd like to join up. See, I'm hesitating. I'm trying to give you a nonverbal message. I'm hesitating to go any further and discuss what would happen. Because even though I'm making up this school of enlightenment that's there and that you went and applied to, but even not that withstanding, that I made it up, let's assume that it got as far as I described it. That you went there and you said what you wanted, and they went, well, that's exactly our field of expertise. And you go, okay, I'd like to join up. If it had gone that far, after that it becomes fiction on top of fiction. That is, that the applicant goes, all right, what do I do? It would be almost as though whoever had been talking to him would realize, well, this whole thing is fiction. It's not going on. I am not here running, or I'm not the admissions dean of a school of enlightenment, and this person's not really here applying, but it's gone this far. And now he's asking, now he says he wants to, and he wants to know what to do. This has gone too far for me. Even though I'm just imaginary, even though I'm just imaginarily in this scenario, it's gone too far with me. And that's what I was doing about going, because even an imaginary person in that imaginary scenario, if they were part of an imaginary school of enlightenment, they would go, this has gone too far, I cannot answer that. Why could he not answer it? All right, I figured you'd ask that. I'll give you the simple reason. The person says, all right, I'm ready to do it, I'm ready to join up, what do I do? The real answer is, well, we don't really have anything for you to do immediately. That is, not by way of admission, not by way of confession, not by way of some verbal show of honesty. That goes on. All sorts of cults throughout the ages do very little that's different from AA or religions. That it's just simply another hobby. It's simply another aspect, another arm of civilization. It's just something that you go join. And many things throughout history that passes or claims to be some sort of mystical organization, the only thing that's required is that you join. And they likewise, not understanding, but they likewise will require some admission, at least to sign your name on a pledge card that says, I will live by the rules of the great three-eyed mystical order of Tibet. And they'll hand you a little card and they'll say, now you read that. So you read it and they go, read it again. So you read that sentence again that says, I will abide by all the rules and I now admit that I want to be a member. I apply by signing my name. They go, do you understand what you're doing? You go, well, okay. And they go, now think about it. Okay, all right, sign your name. That is about the beginning and the end of it. But if it was a fictitious real school of enlightenment, there is no display of honesty. All right, now let's get on with it. I'm trying to get you to see that under ordinary conditions, you have to make some admission. They don't necessarily call it honest, show of honesty, but you are attempting at a moot level to display some new sense of honesty for you. That an alcoholic, he's been drinking, wrecked his life, all of his careers, his family, he's done it all his life, and he has continually insisted. This is just a classic description of an alcoholic, or one of the characteristics. He continually denies that he is an alcoholic, denies that he has the slightest problem with drinking. Just the same as a sinner from the church's viewpoint, that he just goes along in his sin and his folly and denies that there is a God, denies that someday he'll pay for this. He denies he's a sinner. He just says, I'm having fun. And nothing can be done, says the church. Nothing can be done, says psychology or AA, until a man gets honest and admits what he is. That oftentimes, at the ordinary level, seems to have a discrete impact, an observable impact. In religion, it's oftentimes known as conversion in the fundamentalist religions. It's known as people being struck by the convicting power of God or Jesus. And once they stand up in church and publicly proclaim, I am a sinner, and I ask that God save me, God redeem me, God pull me from what I am. And it's very common for them to claim to undergo some emotional experience. Sometimes it's physical. The people will fall down, they faint. And by the same token, at a more mundane level, I'm sure that very similar things happen in AA meetings the first time somebody shows up. It certainly happens in analytic talking psychology. If a man's lucky, that there seems to be little breakthroughs, they call it, that sometimes a man will start just rambling on and talking about something in his past, something he was ashamed of, so-called memories that he has submerged, that he has denied, that it suddenly comes out and a man feels refreshed. He feels like that we have made some breakthrough. The psychiatrist will say, we have. You have reached a new intensity of honesty. There is that kind of feeling that something has happened sometimes. It's all meaningless insofar as changing a person. It may change their behavior. But their behavior was already giving them troubles, and there was already some passion. There was some price that was being extracted from the person, the drunk, the person who converts to a religion. There was something external to him, something in his life that apparently some cost was being extracted from him that he seems to now find unacceptable. But it does not change what the person is. If it's going to change what the person is, I'll point out the obvious. You should see it. It's just one view. But if it was going to change the person would not have to go join anybody. If the person was going to change, he would quit drinking, that'd be it. He'd just quit drinking and nobody'd ever hear about it. There'd be no comment to be made. He certainly wouldn't need to go join up something. He wouldn't need to go and engage in some conversation with people that he has a problem. If there was any change going on in what a person is, that would have already taken place, and it would be witnessed. It would be evidenced by the fact that he quit drinking. Or that whatever reason seems to drive a man to go and convert to a religion, to whatever he may confess to the priest, like, well, I want to join. I've lived my life as a fool. I have driven away 2 wives. My children won't speak to me. I've been a thief. I've been in jail. So there's all these things that he now regrets. And the plea being, similar to an alcoholic, that if he joins, the expectation is, if I join and I become a Christian or a Jew or Muslim, then these problems will be eased, if not completely cured. If the man was going to cure the problems, if he was going to change, and it would take an absolute change in what he is to do that, then the change would already be upon him. He would not go and have to stand up and swear and ask somebody, ask God, ask a priest to help him with God, to be redeemed, to be saved, to seek salvation, redemption of some kind. That is, to change me. if it was possible for him to be changed, the change would have taken place, and all the things he is now publicly admitting to and regretting, they would have already stopped. It would all happen at one time. It simply does not occur in that manner. And so the admission, the apparent display of some sense of honesty, to stand up and say, yes, I am such and such, I have missed the mark, and I want to do better. That very often is the extent of it. It may be a little burst of energy, as I said. It may seem to be a releasing, a liberating experience, but it's gone in a matter of hours. But that is about the extent of it. That's all they'll ever get after that, other than a new place to go. It's a new hobby. If you're attempting to change yourself, my little made-up scene of a fictitious school of enlightenment, there is nowhere to start. There's nothing to be gained on that level of saying, all right, I will be more honest. I'll have to be honest. Or somebody heard me say it, and they go, all right, I understand. I got to be honest. All right. I'll be honest. I got a terrible temper. I'm lazy, and did I say I had a bad temper? Yeah. All right, I got a bad temper. I'm lazy, and well, hell, that's enough. I mean, really, I got a real bad temper. And all right, is that an admission? I mean, it sounds like it. But an admission of what? Everybody knows that. He knew that. That is not an admission of self-deception. People do not understand self-deception. Psychology talks about it. Religion talks about it in its own way. But psychology, as everyone knows, that's a large part of its vocabulary. A large part of the message psychology apparently has for ordinary man is based upon the fact that without psychology's help, or without your own efforts, with our help, you live in some state of self-deception. And they would say we all do, because we have memories, we have experiences in our lives. We all do, from the best of families, the best of backgrounds. Things have happened in our little lives that we simply could not face, and we have tried to shove them under our little mental rug, and they're now in the subconscious. And religion has the same sort of thing, that sinners deny their sin. They'll try to excuse the way they're drinking. They'll try to excuse the way they mistreat their wife and have extramarital affairs. They will do everything. But the reason they have to explain it is God's dealing with them. They know they're doing wrong. No, they don't. Nobody knows they're doing wrong. The thing is, I don't know whether it's too simple or too complicated, that is not self-deception. An ordinary man has no sense of self-deception. He will talk about it. I didn't make up the term. As I said, it is a common term. It's got to be probably one of the most used, that in synonymous descriptions, in psychology. And in religion, it's just not seen as that way. But that men are fooling themselves. If you're not living a religious life, if you're not a Christian, says the Christian church, you're fooling yourself. Sir or madam, and boy, the day will come when you die and wake up in hell in the lake of fire. Then you'll know. Or psychiatry tells ordinary people that we're all fooling ourselves, and if your life is not workable, then it just shows that your degree, the degree to which you're fooling yourself, is too far out of the norm. Because a psychologist, an expert, will say we all fool ourselves. But if your life becomes inoperable, if you cannot function properly day to day, that just simply shows that your degree of self-deception has reached intolerable limits, and you need help. That is not self-deception. Think about it a second. If I'd started out and just made a blanket statement that I've got a new term for something that's ordinary people never realize this, and here it is. I want you to listen carefully. In fact, write it down. Here is something that goes on as a large part of ordinary life, and it's a large part, the dynamics of it, that keep a man from being able to be more conscious. Now get your pencils ready. Now here's the term. I'll spell it. It's self-deception. You'd think I was crazy. I went through all that on the basis that everyone, any ordinary, sane, educated, sophisticated person, believes they know what self-deception is, and they would agree. If they meet the criteria of being ordinary and sophisticated, they would go, yeah, we all engage in self-deception. No, they don't. And people have no awareness of it. They got the name for it in the same way that if you ask people if they're conscious, they go, yeah. You go, really conscious? They go, yeah. And you go, now, are you as conscious right now as you can be? I mean, and you're not just this second, but you live each day as conscious as you can be. And they go, well, you know, other than little moments, I guess I get all distracted or something, but generally, yeah, what the hell are you talking about? I'm conscious, I deal with other conscious people, I do a job, I have commerce, I have a social life with other conscious. What the hell are you talking about? They do not see anything in that as being a form of self-deception. And they use the term, though, self-deception. And if I'd gone through this whole thing about I've got a description for something that is never seen, people do not discuss it. In fact, I discovered it, and here it is. I'm going to call it, let's see, self-deception. Everybody go, that's silly. We all know that. No, you don't. The state of consciousness in which a man lives from another view, that is, from a view that you see yourself, the more you can get, at least to varying degrees, a little more in control, a little more, develop a little more ability to focus and hold your own attention, forget being awake or enlightened for a moment, then you realize that you can, at the ordinary level, you can be a little more conscious than you normally are. It is possible. Perhaps not moment to moment, but over a period of time that you have determined, you have taken it as your goal to try and be conscious, to try and remember to try to be, then over a period of time, you gradually are a bit more conscious, and you, in retrospect, are aware of it. By the same token, you begin to get a sense that the way in which you were living, whether you'd ever use this term or not, was a kind of self-deception. But not anything specific and not anything having to do with your experiences in life. It has nothing to do with you personally. As always, if you can begin to see this, taking such things, taking life personally, is an absolute door jammer. As long as you're taking whatever's going on personally, which is the way you're supposed to, but as long as you're taking it personally, there's no help. Nothing can be done, whatever it is in your life. All the way from, I guess this will sound silly, but so what, all the way from death to your personality problems, to the things that occur in your life that cause you emotional distress. If you take them personally, there is absolutely nothing can be done, because you believe that there is a cause for it, that there is some source, and as long as you believe that, you're done for. All of that all of the last two or three things I just mentioned are several views of self-deception that are never taken into consideration. If you told a man that has already poo-pooed me saying that self-deception is a non-realized state of man, he went, well, you're silly, you're nuts. Everybody knows that we engage in forms of self-deception. And if you told a man, to the same degree that you take what happens in life personally, that you take your life personally, that you take your personality personally, you take the thoughts in your mind and your apparent emotional responses to what occurs in life, do you take them personally? And a sane man, again, is going to start looking at you very, very questionably. He will say, well, certainly I do, and I'm not sure why you're asking this. What else can you do? My life is mine. I do take it personally. That suits as good an umbrella definition and description of self-deception as any. Because that, as long as you take it personally, and I don't mean just taking a rainstorm personally, that kind of crude joke that I can make, that you get all upset and you think that God made it rain just because he was mad at you and he knew you had a new suit. Not that. You take your emotions personally. You take what you think personally, which you have to if you don't know any better. If you're operating at that one level of consciousness, a common level, then whatever happens, you take personally. Not that God necessarily sent it to you, not that fate dealt you a bad hand, not that the stars are against you, because leave behavior for a minute. Forget the experiences, the things that seem to happen to a man. Look at the things that happen in you. If you take your thoughts personally, if you take what you feel personally, at the ordinary level, there is no greater description, there is no greater manifestation of self-deception. There is no such thing as honesty after that. The whole idea of a man being honest with himself, a man trying to investigate himself, a man trying to know himself, is ridiculous. You have started off, and I don't mean to make this sound like it's a statement derived from formal logic, but you have started off with such a false premise, which is an understatement. It's actually no premise, but you start off with such a false premise that the whole idea that I'm gaining on myself, I am slowly but surely gaining new knowledge about what I am. I am slowly but surely understanding, piece by piece, suspicion by suspicion, clawing my way, I am dealing with the problem of my bad temper. And you know that's ridiculous. I can make up one of my scenes and ask a man, well, how long have you been studying this? How long have you figured you had a bad temper? Oh, Jesus, I realized that about the age. Well, people kept pointing out, but by the age of, let's say, 30, I was really sure that temper, I mean, by then I'd lost 2 wives, I'd lost down 24 jobs, and I've been beat up, and I've been in fights, and I really realized, it took a while, but I realized it. And you go, how old are you now? And he goes, well, 55. So you have known about the temper for 25 years. Yeah, about that. And you're working on it. Oh, yeah. Make progress daily. I only do that, not for the sake of sarcasm. Do you understand it's going nowhere? He is not learning anything about the source of his temper. There is no source of his temper. It is that kind of self-deception that a man, an ordinary man, a sincere man as he's called, can say that he is trying his best to study himself, to be more conscious, to be more humane, to be a better person, to be more reflective. And he can say it. But he might as well be going cuckoo, cuckoo. He might as well be making curly and shimp noises. Because there is nothing possible. It is the immediate, never seen form of self-deception. And a man cannot be honest on that basis. And there has to be some form of honesty, perhaps now deserving of new description, for a person to learn anything. If you start off and you've deceived yourself, allowed life to deceive you, and you attempt to study what you are, even if you say, well, I'm getting better. Used to, I couldn't admit that I had a bad temper, but now I can admit it. So, and I feel better because I am now more honest. Used to, I would deny it. I am now more honest about it. No, he's not. Because it was an illusion to start with. It was a form of self-deception for him to say, I have a bad temper. And so for a man to say, well, at least now I admit it. So used to, I denied it. So I'm becoming more honest. No, you're not. That is not honesty. But there is a kind of honesty that I was trying to get to. And I hate to just leave it. Well, I'm not going to leave it just saying, well, there's kind of honesty that you've got to do to ever get anywhere, because that sounds like you end with a threat again. Like, oh, boy. But it's better than that. There's a kind of honesty that once you see what it is, that it's not a threat hanging over your head like, well, you've got to learn how to do it and use it, or, boy, you'll never get anywhere. Once you see what it is, it's immediately useful. It's not a threat. It is a small degree of liberation, which, again, ordinary people will say, yes, if I could be more honest, and, well, I am becoming more honest. Like I said, I can admit my temper, and I do feel more liberated. No, he doesn't. He's 55 years old. His temper is not as bad as it was. And he says, yes, but I've been working on it. I have read, I bet you, in the last 25 years, I'll bet you I have bought, at great expense, and read probably 200 books on temper, on anger, all the way from psychologists to philosophers. And I